Good morning, everyone. It's Thursday, April 22nd. Coming to you live from Seoul, I'm Kim Mo-kyan. President Moon Jae-in will take part in a multilateral meeting on climate change hosted by U.S. President Joe Biden this evening, where he's expected to highlight South Korea's commitment to climate action. South Korea reported 735 new COVID-19 cases on Thursday, recording the highest daily figure since early January. And Tottenham Hotspur's Son Heung-min has scored 15 Premier League goals in 2020 to 2021, his best goal-scoring season in the competition. South Korean President Moon Jae-in will take part in a multilateral meeting on climate change hosted by U.S. President Joe Biden today. According to the top office, President Moon will deliver a speech during the first session of the Virtual Leaders Summit on Climate on Thursday evening, Korea time. He will highlight the country's commitment to enhance climate action and ask for active participation and interest in the P4G summit to be hosted by Seoul in May. This will be President Moon's first virtual meeting with Biden since he took office in January. Over 20 leaders will take part in the first session, including Chinese President Xi Jinping. And on the peace process in the Korean Peninsula, President Moon Jae-in has urged his American counterpart to engage with North Korea at an early date. In an interview with the New York Times Wednesday, he expressed hope that President Biden will go down as an historic leader who achieved substantive progress for complete denuclearization and lasting peace on the Korean Peninsula. President Moon said he's confident the two sides can find a solution if they learn from the failure of the Hanoi summit and come up with realistic ideas. He called on North Korea and the U.S. to move in phased steps, exchanging concessions and incentives along the way. A South Korea-U.S. summit is scheduled to be held in Washington in May. The pandemic shook up the list of the world's 10 largest economies last year, with South Korea re-entering as the world's 10th largest economy. Brazil, struggling with the rampant spread of the virus, fell out of the rankings. Kim Hyo-sun has more.
South Korea entered the list of the world's biggest economies in 2020 and is expected to remain there until at least 2026, which is the furthest ahead that the IMF projects. This comes as the pandemic has shaken up the rankings, taking a heavy toll on many economies. According to data compiled by the IMF and CNBC, the US, China, Japan, and Germany remain the world's top 4 largest economies, with Brazil being the only country to fall out of the top 10. The South American country, which currently has the world's 3rd highest COVID-19 caseload and 2nd largest death toll, went from the 9th largest economy in 2019 to the 12th largest in 2020. The CNBC analysis explained that South Korea has had some success containing the spread despite being one of the earliest countries to report cases. It also stated that the country's strong semiconductor exports enabled its economy to contract by a modest 1% last year, adding its manufacturing and export sectors remain strong. The IMF predicts the South Korean economy to grow 3.6% this year. In 2005, Seoul was ranked the world's 10th largest economy before falling out again in 2017. It regained its position as the 10th largest economy in 2018, but dropped to 12th the following year. Kim Hyo-sun, Arirang News.
And turning to the COVID-19 situation in South Korea, the nation reported 735 new COVID-19 cases Thursday, recording the highest figure since early January. Of those cases, 715 were local and 20 were from overseas. Health authorities say that cluster infections in the capital and the southern regions have led to a nationwide resurgence, vowing to make more checks on bars, call centers, and sports facilities. Now, meanwhile, as for the vaccination program, a total of more than 2 million people have received their first dose of the COVID-19 vaccine as of Thursday. U.S. President Joe Biden says Washington is willing to send vaccines abroad, but only when the supply at home is sufficient. He said on Wednesday that he hopes to assist other countries with the vaccines, but has to be sure that the U.S. has enough to be confident to send extra vaccines abroad. He added that they are looking at what's going to be done with some of the vaccines not being used. His remarks came at an event announcing that 200 million COVID-19 shots have been administered in the U.S. And so far, about 50% of American adults have received at least one dose. As the world is busy ramping up vaccination efforts, some criminals are taking advantage of the situation by creating fake versions. Pfizer has identified the very first counterfeit version of its vaccine in Mexico and Poland, selling at an incredibly high prices and containing ingredients including anti-wrinkle treatment. Our Chim Min-jung reports.
Fake COVID-19 vaccines are popping up amid rising demand for shots and limited supplies of vaccines worldwide. The Wall Street Journal on Wednesday reported that Pfizer had identified the first cases of counterfeits of its COVID-19 vaccine in Mexico and Poland. In Mexico, in early February, around 80 people paid $1,000 for fake shots disguised as Pfizer's. These shots, however, did no damage to the recipients. Authorities confirmed that the vials were filled with distilled water, labeled with incorrect information, and stored in beer coolers. Mexican police arrested 6 people responsible for the scam. Fake shots of the Pfizer vaccine were discovered in Poland as well. In January, numerous vials labeled as the drug maker's vaccine were found in a man's apartment. Pfizer and Polish authorities confirmed that the vials were different from originals and identical to containers for an anti-wrinkle treatment, which were also found in the apartment. Pfizer also suspected the liquid in the vials contained ingredients used for skin. According to Polish officials, no one has been administered with the counterfeit shot. Crimes intending to exploit vaccination campaigns are also taking place in other parts of the world. According to Interpol, dozens of people linked to thousands of fake COVID-19 vaccines were arrested in China and South Africa last month. In countries including the United States and Mexico, scammers are selling fake vaccines online in order to obtain personal information. The U.S. Department of Homeland Security said 30 websites were removed and more than 70 web domains seized for exploiting vaccine demand. Chim Min-jung, Arirang News.
More countries are tightening their COVID-19 restrictions as the virus continues to spread globally. On Wednesday, German police clashed with anti-lockdown protesters as Parliament approved a new law which gives Chancellor Angela Merkel more power to impose pandemic-linked restrictions. France has added India to its list of travelers who need to get quarantined when entering the country. Lee Seung-jae with the details.
Police clashed with protesters in Berlin on Wednesday, with thousands of Germans taking to the streets to show their frustration with the lockdown. It came after the German parliament approved a new law enabling the national government to impose curfews between 10 p.m. and 5 a.m., as well as limits on private gatherings, sporting events, and shop openings. Schools will also close, and students will return to online sessions if cases exceed 165 per 100,000 residents. With up to 2,200 officers in Berlin to quell the unrest, around 150 people were arrested after they attacked officers or disregarded social distancing rules. Police were seen using pepper spray against protesters who threw bottles and tried to climb over barriers. Chancellor Angela Merkel drew up the new law after some of Germany's 16 federal states refused to impose tough measures despite a spike in cases. The country reported 24,000 cases in the past 24 hours, bringing the caseload to over 3.1 million. In France, the country will impose a 10-day quarantine on travelers from India over fears of a new variant identified there. The measures come as India has been in the grips of a second wave of infections and a new double mutant virus variant, adding nearly 3.5 million new cases this month alone. Similar restrictions have already been in place for travelers coming from Brazil, Chile, Argentina, and South Africa. With over 4,000 cases being reported in Japan on a daily basis, the government plans to impose a new COVID-19 state of emergency on Friday. The latest measures will affect Tokyo and Osaka, as well as the Kyoto and Hyogo prefectures. The restrictions are expected to recommend that department stores and amusement parks close temporarily. The country is facing a surge in cases, with only 3 months to go until the Tokyo Olympics. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
New York City is getting ready to attract visitors from around the world in an effort to revive the pandemic-hit tourism sector. The city's mayor on Wednesday announced plans to inject $30 million into an advertising campaign for the city, which is set to launch in June. This is around 10 times the marketing budget used before the COVID-19 outbreak. The reopening of the Big Apple is expected to boost the city's economy and labor market. With eased restrictions and increasing vaccination rates, tourism in the city is already starting to witness slow recovery. Myanmar protesters have launched a blue shirt campaign calling for the release of over 3,000 people detained by the military. People across the country shared photos on social media Wednesday wearing blue shirts and holding up a hand with the name of an arrested person written on it. It was also the 7th death anniversary of a co-founder of the National League of Democracy Party and the longest held political prisoner in Myanmar history. He wore a blue prison shirt from his release in 2008 until his death in 2014 in solidarity with political prisoners. Russia has announced that 10 members of staff at the U.S. Embassy in Moscow will be expelled in what it called a mirror response to Washington's expulsion earlier this month of 10 Russian diplomats. Moscow's foreign ministry on Thursday said the deputy head of the U.S. diplomatic mission in Russia was handed a note with the news, giving the 10 employees until the end of the day to leave the country. It added that further steps will follow in response to what it called a wave of illegal U.S. anti-Russian sanctions. Earlier this month, U.S. President Joe Biden signed an executive order sanctioning dozens of Russian individuals and entities. A search is underway by the Indonesian Navy for a submarine that has gone missing with 53 people on board. Military authorities said that the 44-year-old submarine was conducting a torpedo drill about 60 miles north of Bali when officials suddenly lost all contact with the vessel. The military has deployed scores of ships to the area and sought help from neighboring Singapore and Australia in the search. The Navy suspects an electric failure occurred during the submarine's dive, prompting the vessel to lose control and sink 600 to 700 meters below the water's surface. As part of efforts to boost defense capabilities, South Korea is working to build a light aircraft carrier by 2033 using homegrown technologies. Officials say the operating cost will be less than 1% of the Navy's budget. Kim Demi tells us more.
South Korea is looking to build a light aircraft carrier by 2033 to defend its maritime sovereignty and protect national interests. A Navy official told reporters on Wednesday that the 30,000-ton ship will help deter aggression from North Korea and achieve victory in battle in a shorter period of time with a minimum damage. The ship is claimed to be relatively safe from the North's ballistic missiles, considering Pyongyang will most likely aim at Air Force bases when targeting Seoul. The government approved in February the shipbuilding project, which has been long pushed by the Moon administration to ensure security and peace on the Korean peninsula. Expected to be equipped with a conventional engine, the light aircraft carrier will cost around $1.8 billion. Regarding questions over the cost-effectiveness and usefulness of the project, the official noted the money will be spent over the next 10 years, adding that most of the money will be reinvested in the local industry. They also stressed that the maintenance and operating cost is expected to come to around $45 million, which takes a mere 0.6% of the 2021 Navy budget. While another $2.7 billion will be needed to purchase around 20 vertical takeoff and landing jets for the ship, the official said the jets will be run by the Air Force as its major assets. Currently, only 8 countries in the world, the US, China, UK, France, Italy, India, Russia, and Thailand have aircraft carriers. Kim Dami, Arirang News.
Wednesday was the National Science Day here in South Korea. Marking the day, we take a look at the strides the nation has made in the aerospace industry. Korea is edging closer to launching its first homegrown rocket. And with the help from the government, a private local firm is leading the way with the development of satellites. Chang Tae-hyun has more.
We are now living in the era of new space, where private companies are leading the development of the aerospace industry, and South Korea is catching up with the market trend. To launch any kind of satellite to the space orbit requires a means of transportation, projectiles. However, as the projectiles can be used as weapons, countries don't share the technology. That's why South Korea has been actively funding and developing technologies to launch its first homegrown rocket. Rocket Nuri, developed by the Korea Aerospace Research Institute, is ready to launch this October. If successful, it will make South Korea the 7th country in the world to have its own space rocket.
South Korea's space industry is a little past the early stages. Satellite technology has improved and the projectile is in its infancy. But since our industrial technologies are developed, I think the pace will pick up. In the future, we'll be expanding our reach to the moon and extraterrestrial planets.
Earth observation satellites are also very important as they can provide information about natural disasters and even allow internet access from anywhere on the planet. SatTrak Initiative, the country's only private satellite company, is making small and medium-sized satellites.
We can launch many more smaller satellites. So with the same price, we can send a lot more satellites, which has a strong advantage in terms of revisit time. If you can have more satellites, you can take the pictures of the site a lot more often.
Satellites with cameras attached to them can go where humans can't and take pictures of things like mountain fires or other large areas from above. And thanks to the Korean government support to help grow the domestic space industry, as well as more interest from local conglomerates, South Korea's space industry is getting bigger. Chang Tae-hyun, Arirang News.
In sports, Tottenham Hotspur's Son Heung-min scored a late penalty on Wednesday in his team's 2-1 victory over Southampton. His 15th league goal also gives him the highest single-season goal tally in his English Premier League career. He had an earlier goal disallowed in the 75th minute after a controversial offside review. Son's goal gave Spurs the full 3 points and a perfect start for new interim manager Ryan Mason. The proposed European Super League looks all but over, with 8 of its 12 founding teams pulling out. The latest teams to withdraw are Inter Milan and Atletico Madrid. The ESL kicked off ambitiously with 12 teams from England, Spain, and Italy announcing that they would form a league of their own. But with days, the ESL has been torpedoed by a major backlash from fans, football authorities, and even with Britain's Prince William. One of the main figures behind the ESL, Andrea Agnelli, reluctantly called time on the project on Tuesday night. The ancient board game of Paduk, or Go, has always been perceived as a male-dominant sport. But one individual is challenging that stereotype. Our Han Seung-woo gets us better acquainted with Choi Jung, who's taking the women's game to new highs.
Behind every stone she places lies some complex strategic calculation. South Korea's Choi Jung is Paduk's leading lady. She's the highest-ranked woman on the GoRatings.org charts and has been the Empress of South Korean women's Paduk for the past 7 years. That's not the title Choi is after, though.
Since I was little, my goal has always been to win a mixed-gender international tournament. For some odd reason, I want to win the Samsung Cup so bad. I do better at the LG Cup, but it's the Samsung Cup that I crave.
Currently the only woman in the world's top 100, Choi hopes her success can encourage other female pros to break through any preconceived boundaries.
Don't limit yourself. Perception is a scary thing, you know. Once society labels you as good enough, you unknowingly grow satisfied with yourself when there's still room for improvement. This then prevents you from unlocking your true potential.
Despite recent growth, women still make up less than 1/5 of Korea's professional Paduk players. But if Choi can win an international mixed-gender title, it could inspire more women to take up the game.
Female pros haven't performed well enough to be viewed by children as stars or heroes. Chae-jung is one of the very few who can change that.
Professor Nam believes other changes are also needed, though. For more young girls to learn Paduk and dream of becoming the next empress, she says women-only cups should be upgraded in scale and prize money. That would then help widen the talent pool and elevate the women's game as a whole, so that Chae-jung is no longer seen as an exception. 한성우, Arirang News.
Good morning. It's going to be another very warm day with temperatures getting up to the mid to upper 20s. So Seoul, Daegu, Gwangju will make it to 27 degrees Celsius, but there will be more clouds than yesterday. So UV rays will not be as strong as yesterday, but high levels of fine dust continue for the west of central regions, including the capital region, while ozone levels will be high across the country, and that's including here in the capital. So those of us in Seoul will be dealing with dust, ozone, and dry conditions. The capital is under dry weather advisory now, as dry alerts have expanded to more regions. So please be extra careful with anything that could cause a fire. Well, rain is in the forecast for Jeju tomorrow and Saturday, but elsewhere we'll have more days with dryness. Meanwhile, warmer than average temperatures will continue through the weekend. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the weather conditions around the world.
And that will do it for us at this hour on Arirang News. We'll be back with more of the day's headlines at noon Korea time, so stay tuned. Thank you for watching and goodbye.